Good morning. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco, California, and welcome to the Spring Forum. Many people today feel that our economy isn't working the way it should. A system meant to create prosperity is too often driving instability, inequality, and ecological damage. But what if our economy could function less like a machine that extracts and more like a living system, capable of renewal, resilience, and healing? What if, instead of merely sustaining what we have, we could help regenerate what has been lost? Our guest this morning, Eugene Kirpichov, has devoted his life to that question. Eugene left a successful career as a machine learning engineer at Google after realizing that he could no longer justify working on anything other than climate solutions. He went on to found Work on Climate, a global community that has helped tens of thousands of people redirect their talent toward healing the planet and building a regenerative future. This morning, we'll be exploring what it means to bring our economic systems back into alignment with the living systems that we depend on, and what role each of us might play in that transformation. Eugene, we're so glad to have you on the forum today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Malcolm. It's a big honor.
Yeah, you were a software engineer for many years. I wonder, you had a change of mind where you decided to kind of redirect your life. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what that was like. Was it kind of like a sudden conversion, or was it something that gradually built up over time?
Yeah, it was not sudden. It was quite gradual. I think it began first when my partner at the time, an environmental scientist, talked to me about what is going on. And at the time, honestly, it was too scary to handle, so I just shut it off and didn't pay any attention. Then later on, at my own pace, I happened to watch The Inconvenient Truth, the movie by Al Gore, on a flight from, I think, San Francisco to Zurich, and then watched the sequel to it on a flight back, and really started scratching my chin, like, this looks pretty bad. Yeah. Somebody better do something about it. And after that, I simply started paying more attention, and I met Google's internal energy scientists and asked them, is it really that bad? And they're like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And just overall, over time, this got to a point where it stopped making any sense to work on anything else. And then the last straw was when I discovered that my colleague at Google AI, Cassandra, was feeling the exact same thing. So a week after we learned this about each other, we one-upped each other into handing our resignations, and we're well on our way.
So did you and Cassandra work together after that, or you just went your own separate ways?
No, so what happened is we quit together, and we decided that we're going to spend some time looking for what is it that we're going to do about climate. But certainly we wanted to dedicate our full attention to it. So we quit, and then both of our goodbye notes went viral, and I think 500,000 people saw these notes, and hundreds started emailing us, about evenly mixed between people who are already working in climate and saying, we want to help you and people like you. And the other half was people who also want to work on it, and they were saying, Eugene, how do I work on it? Please tell me where to start. And I don't know, man, I'm trying to figure it out myself. But we decided to start work on climate together because it seemed like the opportunity is right here. There was clearly a lot of work to be done and a lot of people who want to do the work. So why don't we put the two and two together?
Yeah, it seems like climate is just such a big problem. It can be debilitating for people. Just as you said, your first experience with it, you just almost didn't want to know what was true. How do you help people to just kind of get beyond that initial sense of just disempowerment, that the problem is so big? How do you help them to A, understand the problem, and B, understand that there's something that they might do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a whole complex of many different ecological issues at play here. I think if I had to give a one-word answer, it would be community, and I'm not just selling our community. It's free. There's nothing to sell. But let me think where I should begin my answer here. So first of all, I think it's recognized by now that the reason that many people kind of shut it off is that this information is inherently traumatic. It is really like telling somebody hey, your uncle abused me. Except the uncle is our whole economic system that has created our own success. And what? My uncle? No. And it takes some time to really process that information, right? So really what that is not what we do, but when it comes to psychologists who specialize in this, they say that you need to really use trauma-informed methods to help people process this information. It's not a matter of lack of knowledge. So one of my favorite authors, Vanessa Machado Oliveira, she wrote this incredible book called Hospicing Modernity, and we'll probably come back to this book later in our conversation today. But one of the things she says there is that there's two kinds of ignorance. There is ignorance in the sense that you lack the knowledge, and there is ignorance in the sense that you are unable to accept the knowledge, like you're unable to process it. And when it comes to climate, we're facing the second kind. It's not a matter of telling everyone, did you know that we're on track for collapse? They're like, I know, but I don't want to think about it. Yeah. So that's one thing. But the other thing, when it comes to moving people to action, I think there's a big identity barrier here. So there are some knowledge barriers too, right? So most people simply don't know that it is possible to do anything about it, except for walking around, with a strongly worded banner or calling a representative. People don't realize that the act of solving climate change to the extent it can be solved is the act of rebuilding the economy. And the economy was built by people. It was not built, by gods. It was built by us right here, and it is upon us to rebuild it. So that leads to the realization that you can actually work on this. Your options of action are not limited to calling a representative and asking them to ask somebody else to work on it. We actually did a research project that showed that I think even among climate concerned and climate alarmed Americans, only about 12% realized that working on it, like acting on climate through work, is more impactful than acting on it through recycling your trash or through, again, voting. While it is really absurd if you think about it, you spent your entire life building your talent, building your networks, your influence, your skills, your authority, and you're spending 40 hours per week applying them to something. Like, obviously, it is much more impactful than recycling your trash, which is something where you have no special advantage. But most people don't know that. But then when it comes to, even after you do realize that, there is the next ecological barrier, which is probably the hardest of them all. It is the barrier of agency and identity change. And so, for example, probably the reason why it took me so long to leave Google was that I was a big data guy. I was an engineer. I prided myself on being a really good engineer. I hung out with my engineer nerd buddies, and we bonded about engineering matters, and it felt great. I am one of us, so to speak. And then over there, I'm a nobody. Right? So what you really need is a sense that there is a sense of acceptance on the other side. That the people over there are people who will welcome you, people who are just as smart as you, who value a lot of the same things, such as value excellence, value building something. While I think many people hesitate to act because they think that who is on the other side is people who value yelling, and that's just not true. So that means that one of the most powerful ways to overcome these hesitations is community and relationships that give a sense of acceptance, and they give you like a container in which to process the information and to develop your new identity.
I think of the idea that the economy is something that we build together is a very powerful image, but I also think of it as something that we've been building together for centuries. Yeah. So for 400 years, we've been building this thing, and it was built with a certain experience of the natural world, with a certain experience of our natural resources, and that has fundamentally changed just because of human technological reasons. Like, how possible is it to change that system that took hundreds of years to evolve, to change that in a generation or to change that in a person's lifetime?
Yeah, I think there's multiple questions here. So one is it possible to change it at all? Yes, of course, we have changed it many times, right? We used to have kings. We don't have kings anymore. We used to have completely different economic systems earlier, and many of them are still alive today. Humans have had actually regenerative economies. So one of the most inspiring examples for me here is there is this talk by indigenous activist and scientist Lila June Johnston. It's called Architects of Abundance. And in the talk, she just talks about the examples of indigenous societies that built massive, Los Angeles-sized food systems and aquaculture systems and so on. So it's not that their societies were too small to do damage. They were big enough to do damage if they wanted to. But instead, they built something completely different. They were actually a species that they were a keystone species in their ecosystem. They were positive for what was around them and then thrived even greater because of that. They built these food systems that regenerated soil health and regenerated the health of aquifers and increased biodiversity, and at the same time provided them with ample food supply. So they were having a great time. This is very much possible. Now, the question is it possible to change it, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? Honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's possible to change in 5 years, but I think this is going to lead us to one of the kind of more spiritual aspects of this. So this is probably going to be a heavy thing to hear, or it is a heavy thing for me to say. I don't believe that we're going to avoid a collapse, and I don't believe that we're going to have a thriving regenerative economic system within my lifetime. Within my children's lifetime, maybe, right? I think it's going to be. So the way I frame kind of the task for myself, it is not to avoid collapse, because I can't say with a straight face that this is possible. The task is more like to plant the seeds of something that's going to grow on the ashes and ultimately fulfill humanity's mission of becoming a species that creates life. Maybe not in this round, but in the next round for sure. So that's how I see the mission.
Do you see societies that are kind of further advanced in regenerative principles and societies that are less so? And what can we do to increase the number of societies that might be more connected to these kinds of principles?
Yeah, Malcolm, would it be helpful if I first spoke a little bit more about what
I was just thinking that. Let's do that.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let us remember what is an economy in the first place. It is, I think, the easiest way to frame it is simply a situation where an exchange of resources and information happens in the long term.
Yeah,
so
a system of rules that govern how we interact with one another.
That's also one way to talk about it. Yeah, but there don't have to be explicit rules. So, for example, the Amazon rainforest, it is an economy by itself because there is an exchange of resources happening. Animals and plants exchange resources, they die, they eat each other, they digest each other, and more life grows on that. They exchange information, and so, it's an economy in a very meaningful sense of the word. Likewise, even my body is also an economy because an exchange of nutrients happens between my cells, and exchange of information happens between my cells and my organs. And it is going very well. I've been around for 38 years. Hopefully, we'll be around for a while longer. So it's a quite healthy economy. Right? And it has this wonderful property that my cells and my organs, this activity that happens, it is actually in service of the health of the whole. And it's not because my kidney is very altruistic and mission-driven. It's not because there is the right politician at the top of it. It's simply that humans have evolved for their bodies to function this way. And those who did not evolve to function this way, they died and they were not around to pass their genes. Right? So over time, nature has discovered how to have economies that sustain themselves rather than destroy the foundation that they're based on. Nature has had those experiments too, many times. It has simply evolved away from them. So a regenerative economy is an economy, it is the idea of acknowledging that if the whole dies, the whole system dies. There can be no greater purpose to any economic activity than taking care of the health of the system itself and of what it depends on. That is literally the point. It is not an altruistic point of view. This is what it is about. An economy is a tool for care. And then it is the prompt to look, like there is so many systems in nature that show us how to do it. Right? The invitation is not to go back to the forest. Right? The invitation is not to make our economy exactly equal to the Amazon rainforest. But the invitation is to see, like, wow, this rainforest has been around for 50 million years. I think not even Elon Musk can say that our economy in the current form is going to have that kind of track record of longevity. Right? So it's an invitation to ask, how does it do that? Is there some learnings that we can transfer? And there are learnings that we can transfer. So some of the observations we can make about how living systems do it is that they're structured as kind of nested networks of mutual care, where the needs of the individual happen to be aligned with taking care of the health of the whole. There is resilience coming from diversity. There is scale in the sense, not in the sense of monoculture scale, but in the sense of like a great diversity emerging from the same rules, but in a different way in every single place, and so on. So this is what a regenerative economy is. It is not a proposal for a specific economic system. It is a proposal, let's look how living systems do it, borrow something from that, and learn to build our own economy that has this wonderful property of increasing its health as it goes and increasing the health of the systems that it depends on as it goes. Basically, the harder it goes, the healthier it gets, is the destination. Now, when it comes to what we can do in order to get there, I think we can likewise observe how did this wonderful property evolve in nature. It's not like it was there from the start, right? Like at the beginning, at the start, there was a soup of chemicals. That's all there was. And then there was a soup of slightly more complicated chemicals, amino acids. Then there was a soup of single-celled organisms, because it turned out that single-celled organisms manage to, they thrive quite well, right? They are able to replicate, so they thrive well. Then it turned out that multi-cell organisms, that when single-cell organisms work together and united to something of a greater level of complexity, a multi-celled organism or even an animal, they turned out to be even more beautiful and even more successful. Then when ecosystems form of animals and humans, they are even more successful and even more beautiful. And now, humans are forming our own ecosystems, but the point is that throughout this whole time, nature was trying different things, and some of them turned out to work very well, and some of them didn't turn out to work well. There were many great extinctions in history. But ultimately, it happened through a process of evolution and natural selection, but not at the level of just individual cells, but at the level of organization into more complex wholes. For example, the elephant, it is not simply a really competitive bacteria, right? It is something of an entirely different level of complexity. So this might be sounding a little abstract, but the point is that the path to big healthy systems happened through trying what kind of systems can stay healthy while getting big. So that is precisely what we need to do, in my opinion, in the economy. We already have many kinds of holes in the economy. The C corporation, the union, the democratically governed country, the learning community, the safe note, like the traditional instrument used for venture capital investment. But clearly, these types of organization into wholes are not working very well at maintaining health. So what we need to do, I think, is to keep working in that direction. We need to stop thinking of innovation just as innovation on technologies, that is like breeding more competitive bacteria and hoping that you will come out with an elephant. You're not going to come out with an elephant through breeding bacteria. But the invitation is to start innovating on how we organize into wholes, so forms of organization, types of cooperatives, types of various collective governance, ways to finance whole communities rather than just finance individual companies and individual transactions. So I think the task ahead of us is to spin up this whole new discipline of innovation on the structure of the economy. And just like beautiful species in nature emerged from that process, so this can happen here too. Except in nature, we had to rely just on natural selection. You try something, it doesn't work, and it dies. Here, humans have the unique quality of being able to direct this process intentionally. Like we know we're not at the mercy of natural selection, of just trying things and either going extinct or not. But we can say that, what, we actually want to build an economy that builds more health as it goes, and use our entire intelligence and our technological tools and our infrastructure and everything else to figure out how we're going to do that.
So, I mean, that's a beautiful kind of picture and abstraction. Like, practically speaking, like, what are we going to do about plastics? Like, this morning I had a little blueberries on my cereal, and it came in a plastic container that is going to be thrown out, and it's going to last for another, century or something. So what does it mean about just like practical inputs to like industrial processes and just consumers' ability to just accept that we're going to just throw out all this stuff?
Yeah, great question. So if we need companies that don't do that to outcompete those that do. right? And that can happen due to a variety of incentives. It can happen because there's policy that doesn't let them do that. It can be because consumer norms have changed. It can be because companies that take care of the health enjoy some kind of other advantage, like maybe they're part of a coalition of companies that have together committed to take care of the health of the planet and of our environment, and this coalition has developed tools that make them really powerful and make them be able to basically destroy their toxic competition, right? So it is, I don't think that we're going to get there simply by creating plastic-free technologies, like we might. If we get lucky and it happens that those technologies are more profitable, great. Unfortunately, nothing prevents somebody from coming up with an even more profitable but even dirtier technology. So what needs to happen is, yeah, go ahead, Malcolm.
No, go ahead. I'm just thinking about just government regulation, how that all fits in too.
Yeah, government regulation definitely does fit into this. So let me try to reframe the question a little bit. So let's say that we set our eyes on the idea of getting rid of plastics, right? So traditionally, the way that we would address this, there would be two ways. One way would be, let's create a technology that is plastic-free and very profitable so that it is just naturally adopted by this economic system. The second is, let's take a big hammer and pass a politician that's going to ban it from the top down. These are both valid tools, just it seems clear that they're not sufficient. So the invitation is to consider a third category of tools, which is more complex forms of organization in the economy, which can be like, let's try to assemble a coalition of organizations that are going to, on one hand, commit to do this, on the other hand, develop the power that allows them to have competitive advantage or to have more political power to pass these policies. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. For the whole premise of work on climate and of my work is that we don't know what it's going to look like in each specific industry, but the point is that the people in the industry do know, or they can figure it out because they know how their industry works. They spent their whole life there learning how change happens in the industry, what are the incentives, what the incentives could be, and so on. So I think that if we get people in the plastic industry and people in the plastic adjacent industries to empower them to work together on this problem and say, and get them also on board with the idea that there is more than two ways to work on it, I think they can figure it out. On one level, I suspect that what I'm saying may be disappointing because I don't have a specific answer, but I can't have a specific answer. There is thousands of branches of the economy. The point is that the shape of the answer is likely to be going to be something slightly different. It's going to be a new type of coalition that influences policy or creates demand or creates some kind of other competitive advantage for this.
Yeah, so we earlier talked about just examples of other societies, other communities that where it seems like there's a more regenerative approach. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, there are many kind of seeds of regenerative economics that are alive today. So I think one of the examples is actually the Episcopal Church's own banking practices. I forget what the loan fund is called, but it is if I'm not mistaken, it is a loan fund where the purpose of giving a loan is not just to make the maximum amount of money possible, but also to regenerate capital in the community of lenders, right? This is it is obviously something that's good for the for the one who is giving the money as well, right? So that's one example. Beneficial State Bank also uses this. Then there is, for example, the Mondragon Cooperative in Spain. It is a famous example. It is a cooperative of, I think, several hundred businesses with several tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of employees together. And these businesses, they are basically, they have as one of their objectives taking care of the health of the whole cooperative. Right? And because of the way they do that, by pooling resources, by helping each other out, by having certain governance processes, it has been very resilient to a variety of economic shocks. Right? And I will not be surprised if something like this cooperative is going to survive the economic shocks that will take down, the likes of big companies of today. Right? They're big, but they're also fragile in a meaningful sense because they're kind of a monoculture. While a more resilient cooperative, it might not outcompete them today, but it might outlast them. which is also a meaningful way to outcompete.
Yeah, one of the things I was curious about is just like how work on climate got started, and just like what it does, and how that process has evolved over the time that you've been working on it.
Yeah. So initially, Work on Climate's objective was to help people find climate jobs. So the premise was we spoke to all of these experts that were building different kinds of climate solutions. We realized that when it comes to the people whom they need to do the work, it's not actually climate scientists. It's not environmental scientists. We have enough of those. What they actually needed was, for example, let's say they're building a new type of battery. Well, they need expert electrochemists, right? Or they need people from the automobile industry who can figure out how to drive this battery to market adoption, right? Or maybe they're building renewable energy, and they need people who have experience in the energy industry, or people who are really good at sales, or people who are really good at project finance, right? Or they need people who are really good at marketing and storytelling, so that the stakeholders they need to convince move beyond inertia and get inspired by it, right? So it is like pretty much the same type of people they need who are building the rest of the economy. So we thought if this is the case, well, there is a lot of people in the rest of the economy who want to help them. So this is what we tried to do. We did it very successfully. Indeed, it became the largest community in the world of this sort, about 40,000 people today, and maybe well over 3,000 people say that not only they did find a career in climate, but also it was because of the community. Several thousand people on an entrepreneurial path also credit us with some kind of progress. For example, I know a couple of people who, Rich and Kenny are their names, they met in the community, and they became co-founders. They built a robotic agriculture company that basically dramatically reduces the need for toxic fertilizer that takes a lot of emissions to produce and then destroys soil as it is applied. So they built this company, and it just, I think, recently raised several tens of millions of dollars. So it's been very successful. But then, maybe about a year and a half ago, I started asking myself, as well as my team started asking ourselves, how far can you really go down that path? Can you really create systemic change? And no, unfortunately, you can't. You can accelerate implementation that's already underway. So if there is a job opening, great, you can fill it. That company will go faster. If there are market conditions to start a company, great, you can help people start that company. But there is not much you can do about really the hardest parts of this, where a company that would solve a certain issue simply cannot exist today because the system is stacked up against it. And as I was thinking about that, I came across an even scarier concept. It was a lot for me to take in, and took some spiritual processing to understand what it really means. It's the concept of the polycrisis. So what that concept means is it is the idea that there is two dual concepts, polycrisis and metacrisis. Polycrisis is referring to the idea that we're facing a multiplicity of crises at the same time. There is the climate crisis, there is the biodiversity breakdown, there are the existential risks of AI, there is the breakdown of democratic governance, there is the breakdown of global collaboration, and so on. So each of these crises is individually scary enough to potentially end civilization in the current form. And we don't seem to be anywhere near on track to solving any one of them. So we have incredibly little hope of of solving all of them, right? And in order to avoid catastrophe, we have to solve all of them. So that's the bad news. The good news is that these are the same crises, and this is what the concept metacrisis is referring to. Is really these are all symptoms of the fact that our socioeconomic system simply lacks the ability, kind of the feature of being able to take care of the health of anything. Right? It has many great qualities. It is very efficient. It can develop very powerful technology. It has, successfully taken a lot of people out of poverty. But there is just this one, there is the rub. It can't take care of. It lacks the ability to even comprehend what it means to take care of the health of something. That's not what bottom lines are about, right? So because it lacks this feature, it is creating all of these crises. And it is a very fundamental limitation. So we can't overcome this limitation simply by developing new technology. That's kind of like, you have a rabbit and you want it to fly, so you throw it in the air, and it flies for a little bit, but to really fly, it needs to grow wings, and our economy doesn't have those wings. The good news is that we can do kind of the genetic engineering to have it grow wings by, developing these new forms of organization and so on. But we need to know that it is wings that we're trying to grow, right? So this was a scary realization, and it became clear that you can't really do that type of work just by getting people into jobs. This is work of systems transformation. And if you want to do work on systems transformation, you need people to do things that nobody's asking them to do. You need people to step up and become leaders, and not just leaders, but leaders who act together in coordination towards the goal of transforming their sectors. So that is what prompted work on climate's two concurrent reframes. One is the reframe from helping people find climate jobs to helping people become climate leaders. So people who reshape their companies, reshape their industries, reshape their communities, and generally, use their entire spectrum of professional strengths to change things, both individually and in coordination. So really, systemic change happens when, if you read any book about how to do systemic change in practice, it says, like, get a group of people in the same sector, align them on a goal, and have them push on all leverage points at the same time through all they got. So that's the objective now for us. And the second is, systemic change towards what? It is towards regenerative economics.
Yeah. So what have you learned just about kind of people's psychology and what drives them in this work, over the last 6 years?
Yeah, I learned that everybody cares, and the barriers to action are indeed psychological. So I learned that these barriers are much harder than I thought. So initially I thought, what's the big deal? Like, just go and work on it. And then it turned out that there are all of these identity barriers, and these identity barriers are even bigger when it comes to having people, like guiding people to step into leadership. So enough people are stuck in the idea that there's nothing you can do. Many of the rest are stuck in the idea that there's nothing you can do through work. Among those who want to do something through work, most are stuck in the idea that there's nothing you can do except find a job. So if there's somebody who scoped out a job position for exactly someone like you, great, you can apply for it and compete against the other 500 people who are applying for it. But if you fail to win the job, there's nothing you can do. And it is serious psychological work that we have to learn how to do, is how to help people move past that, and how to perceive, like how to get out of that idea that this is a competition to get the job. Like that is kind of a meaningless idea, right? If somebody is going to fill the job anyway, then what's the point in you winning it, right? You don't really advance climate progress by being the one who wins it. You advance climate progress by doing something that wouldn't have happened if not for you. And that is a big step for many people to take. All right, it requires letting go of the very ingrained idea that progress happens through winning. Right, that is a very, very core idea, and it also requires letting go of an even more core idea that if you're working on a good cause, you must be innocent. So this is what makes it particularly difficult for people to set their eyes on transforming their company or their industry. And I realized that this is somewhat hypocritical coming from me, because this is exactly what I did. Right, I did leave. And I'm not saying that in every company you can be equally effective, but coming back to that book called Hospicing Modernity, so that book, it's a heavy read. I like to describe it as, the experience of reading it as taking a scalpel to my entire value system. And one of the, so she deconstructs in the book the entire kind of value system that is creating our economic system and our overall modern social experience. And one of the things that she points out there is that one of the toxic components of our value system that's creating this is the desire for innocence, like the desire to be non-complicit with evil. And that leads to all kinds of toxic dynamics. Like, it leads us to defend our innocence when we're not innocent, because we simply cannot accept that it is okay to, that it is basically impossible to be innocent. It leads us to, close our eyes to the dirt and to the difficult things that are happening. We'd rather have nothing to do with them. And it also makes it difficult for us to work on transforming, so to speak, dirty systems, because we want to be pure, and we equate like working on good causes with being purely good. These are not the same thing. And I don't think that I have fully embraced this lesson myself, but I think we collectively have to embrace this lesson if we're going to make progress. So that's another serious ecological barrier. But when it comes to what really works, yeah, community really works. So the kind of progress that we have created thus far would have been completely impossible without community as the tool. We would have gotten nowhere near this far if, for example, we were an education provider where there is the teacher and there are students into whom the knowledge is deposited, and then they become ready for climate action.
Part of it too is just the technology too, that, I mean, you're able to connect with people through the internet. I mean, if you had to write a letter to everyone and it was 1975, it would have a totally different shape.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Malcolm, you have the Regenerative Economics book over there, I think, and its author, John Fullerton, he says that actually the internet, right here, that the internet was, at least at the beginning, one of the most regenerative economic structures humanity has created. It ended up being corrupted and co-opted. So in that regard, we dropped the ball a little bit. But at the core of it, it is a very powerful regenerative structure because it enables so much coordination and caring for people who are somewhere else, learning that they need our care and organizing for that. So yeah, it has been in many ways a fantastic tool for building community. But it does point our eyes to the fact that these tools are not kind of pure by themselves. They can be corrupted and co-opted, and it is an eternal task caring for that not happening.
Yeah, exactly. And they need, from my perspective, I mean, it needs the coordination of government. It needs, and that's what a market is for me. It's like it's a legislative identity. The word nomos in economy, oikos means house. In Greek, nomos means rule or law. And so it's almost setting aside little communities that are governed by certain, and maybe some of them, the laws are just habit. Some of them might be like written down in as laws in the law books. Some of them may be just the way that we interact with one another. But that's how that works. But I have a lot of questions about. I have a number of friends who are in their mid-20s, and so they're making that transition between being in college and what their final thing is going to be. And they're having a really hard time. I think they want to make a difference and want to make a change in the world, but it's really hard to find what it is that they can be doing so that they have their full adult selves. But you must interact with so many people who are in that situation. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what advice and help do you give to somebody who's went to a great college, has a great degree, maybe even has worked at a very high-paying job, but or it hasn't worked in it, but is looking for that way they can make a difference in this.
Yeah, Malcolm, is it okay if I first say a little bit about the intersection between regenerative economics and law and policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an important one. So in this book, John Fullerton, its author, observes that policy and law play a different role in this economic paradigm than they play in the paradigm of today. So they play more like the role that laws of physics play in nature than the role that caps on pollution play in today's economic system. So the role of policy, kind of regenerative economics, lies outside the spectrum of left and right, in the sense that right is no regulation, left is top-down regulation that forces everyone to be good. In the paradigm of regenerative economics, the purpose of policy is to create the conditions for that evolution towards health to happen. It is not to impose health as a hard rule. It is to create the conditions in which health can evolve, and conditions that do not contradict it. So that means, for example, that does mean that policy has to limit power, right? Because if you have unlimited power, it's very difficult to have health. But it does mean that policy, for example, does not necessarily play a role in incentivizing specific technologies, right? But to your question, Malcolm, about advice to people who are hoping to do something about this through their work and what they can do. So first, I think, again, it is important to get outside the frame that in order to do this work, you need a sustainability role in the title.
I think part of it is just finding any work. Like, how do you, if we're in a totally non-regenerative system, like, what do you do as a person, like, who's got to figure out what you're going to dedicate your energies to, you know?
Yeah. So let me share kind of a framework in my mind for how a professional can navigate their path to that. So ultimately, your task as a professional is to become a leader of change in your company and in your industry towards regeneration. And in order to be able to do that, you need, I think, three qualities, or at least that's one way of looking at it. You need the quality of vision, which is, the difference between I want to do something about climate and, for example, I want to work on this particular industry standard that is enabling deployment of clean technologies to be speedier, and I want to help the development of this standard by helping them recruit the right experts in this particular area, or by becoming an expert myself. So vision is like this fidelity of whether you have a destination towards which to lead. In order to develop that, you can do all kinds of things. Certainly you can read books, but more effectively, you can try things and you can talk to experts and so on. So that's the first quality. The second quality is power. And power is, that is the difference between having to act alone and being able to mobilize many people towards your cause. And mobilize, that can take many forms. So authority is a form of power, right? Like if you have 200 people reporting to you and you have some liberty to determine what they work on, that's power. But on the other hand, if, for example, you enjoy great trust and recognition among your industry peers, then next time you say, guys, I'm developing a new standard, who's with me? A lot of people will raise their hand, right? So it's, that is also a form of power. So do you know the right people? When you need to find the right expert or the right influential stakeholder to drive towards your destination, towards your vision, can you mobilize the people you need to work together with you on that? So that's the second quality of power. And you can develop it by, by networking with people, but obviously not just the kind of networking about, do you have a job for me? Do you have a job for me? But more like really regenerative networking where you establish trust and where you develop meaningful relationships around something that you both believe in. And the third quality is agency. So that, again, is the difference between being stuck, thinking that, I wish somebody did something about that, and going and saying, it is actually me who is going to do something about that. So that is probably the hardest one of them to develop. I don't know if it is inherently the hardest one to develop, or more that just like the discipline of developing it is not as much in the public eye as, developing strategy and vision and developing network power. But it is a very important one.
I think there's a lot that, basically to be successful in your education system in America today, it's like being able to conform to somebody else's expectations.
Exactly, yeah.
And we have these incredible, like, top experts on conforming to other people's expectations. But this is a totally different thing that we're asking them to do.
It is very, very different. It is the opposite of conforming. Right, you need to be able to navigate it, but indeed this system is, like, by definition, if it's in equilibrium, that means that it has succeeded in aligning everybody's incentives with maintaining itself, right? So a little bit more on that. So what that means for somebody who wants to become a leader or to take action, I think it is important to again, move from the idea of asking, like, what is the most impactful thing I can do and how do I do it, more to the idea that leadership is a lifelong path where you continually develop these qualities in yourself. It becomes more and more clear to you what are impactful things to do. You are increasingly more equipped to work on them because of your power and because of your increased boldness and agency and sense of belief in yourself. And as you develop these qualities, so you continually have more and more options. You continually, choose some of them to work on. You work on them. Then, tomorrow you have even more options. So, I think I want to suggest to people who are on this path to see their path like this, as a lifelong path of development and constant change, where really change is the only constant. And that also, so the kind of beneficial aspect of this is that it makes you realize that what you do to develop these qualities in yourself is valuable in its own right. So, for example, if you win the trust of your peers, but if you're not yet putting it to action, it's still good. Like you're doing something that is a necessary, absolutely necessary component of your future path. So you're building the foundation. You're making an investment, and one day it will materialize.
One of the traditions we have on the forums, we take questions from our audience. So would love to hear what your ideas are, your questions are. The Trump administration has been in place for a year and 2 months. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just how your experience of regenerative economics has changed, how this has helped you to see things in a different way. Because I think all of us see things in a really different way than we did like 2 years ago.
Yeah, so our pivot towards regenerative economics happened basically at the same time as Trump came into power. It started before that. It started when we didn't know whether he was going to win or not. But when he won, it became clear that it was the right thing. Because basically before that, our framing was that there are kind of workforce bottlenecks in the climate space, and we need to get people into those bottlenecks. And then we saw that all of those jobs evaporated, right? And it became even more clear that the task ahead of us is systemic change and not just implementation support. And it also became very visible, a lot more visible. Trump put the system in overdrive, so it became very visible exactly how the system is creating the crisis. Like while previously it was still creating the crisis, just it was a little bit more muted, now we see it on full display. Like how does unchecked corporate power grow in parallel with unchecked political power? Exactly how do companies react to the pressure to develop whatever aspirations they had to do good, and so on. So it became very visible, the dynamics became visible, and that made it even more clear that our task is to change these dynamics.
I wonder, if you had an almost anti-Trump president that was fully dedicated to regenerative economics, what kind of practical policies would that person implement? What would they work on? What would they focus on?
Yeah, so interesting that you ask. Some time ago, a few months ago, one of our largest donors invited me to an event with the American Enterprise Institute, which is a kind of right of center think tank. And what was surprising to me is that, I don't mean to necessarily portray them in a very positive light. Honestly, I don't know enough about them. But it was surprising to me that, one, I didn't meet any climate deniers there. I met opponents of top-down government action. And two, they were surprisingly interested in regenerative economics when I told them about it. So they were like, local distributed sovereignty? Hell yeah. Regulation through the dynamics of the system itself rather than through a top-down politician telling everyone what to do, hell yeah. So I'm not saying that regenerative economics is going to come from the right. I think that's relatively unlikely. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that if we had a politician at the top who was driving the nation towards regenerative economics, that's probably what they would work on. So I think they would try to pass policies that enable more distributed local sovereignty. So they would not be passing top-down policies that force certain notions of good. They would pass policies that enable distributed sovereignty, and they would turn the nation's attention from technology-only innovation to innovation on forms of incorporation and forms of governance and forms of markets and types of financing stacks and types of cooperatives and so on. And they would, so if I was in that position, I would probably work really hard to direct several tens of billions of dollars towards developing that kind of innovation, right? And as that innovation takes foot, it would hopefully end up outcompeting the current toxic structures. And I think that it is, if you really do it well, it will outcompete them because the current structures are unhealthy, and healthy structures will eventually outlast them. I just would like it to happen sooner.
Yeah. Very interesting. That's an interesting observation about the American Enterprise Institute. Okay, so here's some of the questions that we have. What role do you see for mathematical modeling in developing regenerative economics? It's a great question.
Yeah, a really interesting question. I think I would see the role. Well, first of all, whoever is asking that question is probably more equipped to answer than I am, but I can offer an invitation. I think my invitation would be to apply mathematical modeling to figuring out what kinds of economic structures can be successful in this regard and can stay healthy as they scale. So whatever innovation we need to do, model it so that we avoid false starts. Yeah. Right. I think it's going to be a very complex task because the economic system that we're dealing with is in many senses chaotic. So it's going to be, that kind of math that deals with chaos and strange attractors and whatever are the concepts in that area.
I love the idea that that is implicit in the question, that just in the same way that the internet can be a regenerative technology for human beings, that these large models, that these new techniques that are possible because of the increasing computer power may also have that same quality.
Yeah, Malcolm, are you referring to large language models?
Not just large language models, but every form of, I mean, so you could do. I'm talking about modeling that doesn't even have language in it, that might model just in the same way that a weather model models the climate. It might model like social economic factors.
Yeah, I think on that front, actually, another thing I would like to see in the economic modeling science is basically the success metric of today's economic paradigm is declared to be GDP and other similar metrics. When it comes to a regenerative economy, its success metrics are very different. It's health metrics. They're probably different depending on each context. But it's a different type of metrics, so I think we're probably going to need a different type of modeling science.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so I mean, just in the same way that you can have a large, basically a large matrix that just has one data point, which is the sale price for Chevron gas, and another is every single. This would allow a kind of modeling that is just completely different than that. You talk about the number of songbirds and how fast things bloom in the spring, or what is the density of Douglas fir in Shasta County, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I suspect that another interesting aspect of this is I suspect that any system that optimizes for a single metric is doomed to.
Yeah, well, that's why it makes GDP such a powerful measure, because it's so simple.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to speed up because we've got these questions.
Let's carry on.
Okay, some peers who I see as saints are people I met 40 years ago when they were law students. These 4 decades, they have employed the law combating the climate crisis. What can you tell us about, for example, Earth Justice, a law firm for the environment? Great question.
Yeah, I applaud all of the work that these organizations have been doing. I think it is obviously important to protect our natural systems with the force of the law. I'm saying, I think that, as is probably clear from the rest of what I was talking about today, I don't think that it is sufficient, but I think that it is necessary. I think that protection kind of creates a container within which you can do that work of building more inherent resilience and building qualitatively different kinds of systems. So I'm really glad that they're doing that work.
I have a friend of mine who was the lead lawyer on the Mono Lake. He basically saved Mono Lake. And yeah, if that had gone, we would never get that back again. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that work.
Yeah, and these laws also develop models for how we can create limits on power.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what we'll have to be doing more of.
What can we humans in the economy learn from regenerative principles? If a farm thrives with a diversity of species, what are implications for society, business, and government? When only 0.7% of assets are managed by women, what are the true economic and social implications?
I think the answer kind of writes itself. Yeah, clearly we have huge imbalances of power right now, and we have to reduce them. And the strength of natural systems, again, it comes from resilience and from diversity and from healthy interaction between many different types of species. so that when the conditions change and the dominant species is no longer viable, the whole ecosystem doesn't collapse, right? Like one of the things that is unfortunate about today's state with all of these huge companies that have dominated control of all of the assets is it's fragile, right? One day it's going to break, and if it's the only game in town, that means that the only game in town has broken, right? So this is something that would not have happened if power was more distributed.
Yeah, and that question's exactly about that.
Yeah.
A primary way in which power is distributed very unfairly.
Yeah.
All right. Many of the principles and qualities you've been describing remind me of the community organizing movement. I've seen this work very effectively in local grassroots community change. Do you think that this kind of small and local transformation is something that ordinary people can and should do?
Oh, 100%. I think that this can only happen from the bottom up, or at least like bottom-up work is absolutely crucial to this.
And I guess part of it for me is people having a life that's outside of their work, so that they have the time and the bandwidth to be able to do other kinds of community projects.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. So I think that community organizing ideally builds the kind of resilience that allows people to not just be slaves to whatever the current system is demanding of them, right? It gives them space to do something else, to exercise some kind of leadership when other people have their back. It allows them to change policies. It allows them to develop kind of new forms of organizing. And as I was talking, this is all about creating new forms of organizing. And again, today's economic system, we have created the current forms of organizing, but community organizing is about creating new and healthier forms of organizing. We must do it, but we also must remember that it has to be, we must, I think, have a big ambition for it. What I mean by big ambition is that it should be, we should, I think, remember that when we do this organizing, it is because we want to develop the tools that one day will be deployed in the economy as a whole.
Yeah. Andresen, Thiel, et al. Have a manifesto that AI will solve all of our ecological climate change problems, so we don't need to do anything to work on greenhouse gases, pollution, et cetera. Why is this fundamentally stupid?
It is fundamentally stupid. I'm not sure that stupid is the right word. I think that these people don't use language to communicate what they think is true. I think they simply use it as an influence tool, and as long as it exercises that influence, they write it. So I don't think they're stupid. I think they just operate from a completely different place about the role of language and communication.
So they're not telling the truth?
No, absolutely not.
In short. Yeah, and again, it was back to your point, which is about centralizing the amount of power in particular individuals is so destructive to the overall health of this system.
Yeah, I want to add just a little bit more on that question.
Yeah.
When it comes to the role of AI. I have two points to make here. So one point is the way I see the role of AI is it is accelerating everything in the economic system, and the economic system is headed towards collapse, so it's making it go in that direction faster. Really, that's all it does. There is no reason why AI should accelerate beneficial applications more than it accelerates harmful ones. And in fact, there is a lot of talk about the emissions of data centers, and yes, that's a problem. But when you see what the AI is actually doing, that is a much bigger problem. Because fossil fuel companies are now bragging that AI is going to double the amount of fossil fuels they're able to extract. And the emissions of data centers, they're really a speck of dust compared to that. So that is an example of how it is really just an accelerant for the system as a whole, and becomes co-opted by the system. The flip side of that is we can also think of the economic system itself as what the AI people call misaligned superintelligence. Right? It is already pursuing its own goals of maximizing GDP and maximizing shareholder value. It is pursuing those goals in a way that is not aligned with even its own continued survival. And it is clearly smarter than any individual human at this. Good luck as one individual human who is not organized at outsmarting the system. So I'm not just saying this as a funny gotcha. I'm saying this as in, like, if there's somebody in this audience or somebody who is working on risks of misaligned superintelligence, the misaligned superintelligence is right there. And whatever is your approach, it must be applicable to this.
It's already misaligned.
Yeah.
All right, the next question.
Yeah.
Don't we need a new religion? Everyone in the world has a concept of God. Is it possible to generate a foundational understanding for every person that the earth is a living organism and harm to the earth is harm to ourselves? Could this replace the myth of heaven? So that's the first question. The second question is, the huger problem is the cult of extreme greed, which permeates all power on the planet. Can AI be retargeted to change this mindset from consumerism and self to regenerational ecology?
Very good question. So on the first question about whether a new religion can help, I mean, probably.
It's got to do better than the old religion.
Yeah, I think, religion has a fantastic track record of organizing people. It clearly, religious leaders know a lot about how to organize people. And they could bring this tremendous strength to this formidable task that we're facing. I don't know what it would look like, but religious leaders, again, might. Right? So I think it has a huge role to play. And what this question describes about seeing the earth as one living organism, that is my spiritual framework, personally. And that book that I keep turning to, Hospicing Modernity, the experience of reading it brought me closer to that, closer to like seeing myself not as the valiant savior, and more as one cell within the overall organism that is trying to play its role along with other cells. And to the, sorry, can you rephrase
the second question was about greed and consumerism. Can AI help us with that?
Yeah, I think that it is possible that AI experts who set their eyes on making AI help us with that can figure it out. That is completely different from saying that just because we have AI, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So these are unfortunately very different things. But on that front, so one of my kind of intellectual idols is Audrey Tang. She is the digital prime minister of Taiwan. And in Taiwan, they're doing a lot of experimentation with alternative governance models and with applying AI in those ways. So in a regenerative economy, basically any technology does whatever the economic system wants it to do. Right? So if we had a regenerative economic system, then AI would be accelerating its regenerative power. In this economic system, it's accelerating its destructive power. And so in Taiwan, Audrey and her team are experimenting with ways to do that. And how can AI be used kind of as a guardian spirit of care for local communities? It's very, very, very interesting work. So it's possible. It's possible. It's not what's on track to happen unless we make it possible.
We have so much more to talk about, you and me. I feel like we should just be going for another 2 hours, but unfortunately I have to preach in half an hour, and it means that I have to go upstairs. And I have been thinking about just that old saying that when you have a hammer, the world looks like a nail. And my hammer, I guess, is religion and spirituality, and your hammer is, software engineering, and it does shape our perspective on these problems. But it's important to hear from different perspectives. I love that question about the law firms and the friend who had the 4 legal heroes. That there's a legal perspective from this too. There's an educational perspective. But I'm very grateful for you coming and being part of this conversation, and just for your work too on healing the planet and creating a much better future for our children than the path that we're currently on. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Malcolm.
Please join me next week when my guest is the legendary historian Adam Hochschild. We'll be talking about his most recent book, American Midnight, The Great War, A Violent Peace and Democracy's Forgotten Crisis, and about how the past resonates into the future and shapes the questions we're asking today. I've read about 3/4 of the book. It's exceptional. And why it's such a powerful book is because we keep saying, oh, this is unprecedented, this is unprecedented. He's showing, no, this is exactly what we've done in the past. And what we see in the last year and a half is just more of past America, but just in a concentrated form and in our time. You're welcome to join us at 11 o'clock for after the morning service. And gifts of any size make a huge difference for us. You can give on the way out. You can give by texting the number, the word THINK, T-H-I-N-K, to 76278. And again, thank you so much, Eugene. What a blessing to hear from you and hear what you're working on.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for coming.